if somebody searches St. George, Utah, on YouTube or Google, dude, your videos are coming up.
Yeah.
What made you get started in doing those videos?
It was just a way to get to know the real estate community, because I wanted a way with my business, to just start to drip on people and provide real information. Everyone, when they start a business, they want to get like a newsletter or something that they can put in front of, if you're in the service business, right, and you have reoccurring customers, and you want to build a following, people want to figure out ways to stay in front of their crowd. And I remember thinking, like, I hate newsletters. I hate, when I get them in my inbox, most of them are like templated stuff that's just not.
Or it's TLDR, too long, didn't read, right? Like,
yes.
It's just like a bunch of stuff.
A bunch of stuff that's just not really like,
relevant.
I'm not going to sit and read it. So it took me a while to really like decide on what I was going to do. And then I started, that was back in 2015, 16, when commercials started coming back here. Because after the crash from 08 to 14, 15, there was some residential growth starting to happen, but commercially there really wasn't. And then in 15, 16, dirt started moving all over the place, and I was all over the place, trying to meet people, and I would start to see all this stuff happen, and start dirt moving. So I'd look into it, figure out what's going on, and then it was the Economic Summit in 2016 that really was. I was like, oh, this is like, because I went, and a kid from here, like, this is a candy store to me, right? All these different cool restaurants and different. I mean, I talk about restaurants all the time because that's like what I love.
Yeah.
But all this new stuff I was really excited about. And so I was like, I'm just going to put all this into a newsletter, and maybe I'll run out of content one day, but I'm just going to, that's what my newsletter is going to be. It's just going to be what's happening in Southern Utah.
Yeah.
And then I did that for a few years before I got to know what a drone was. And then, because it's really, my newsletter is just a comprehensive list of everything countywide.
Yeah.
And then video started gaining traction online, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll just get a drone and piece out some of these little sections and just do drone footage. And my first video was awful. I did all the drone work myself. I did it out of my office. And luckily, COVID actually is what took me out of my office.
Yeah.
Well, it was COVID, and I expanded my office, and we turned my office into our copy room. And my new office, I couldn't really, like the backdrop I had before was pretty cool looking, and it was sweet, but my new office didn't have that. So I was like, man. And then COVID is what got me to do weekly videos versus I was doing monthly before. And around that same time, I was like, I'm just going to go outside now. And it was the best thing I ever did. It's way better. So, that's how that, and so then that was in 2018 when I started doing the videos. And at first it was kind of quarterly-ish, then it went to monthly. And then COVID happened, and it's been weekly ever since. Pretty much weekly. Sometimes I miss because of timing issues, but.
Yeah, you're pretty consistent with it, man. At least from everybody here, you're the most consistent, and that's why, like, when you go to YouTube, your stuff's always going to be right there.
Yeah.
What is it? What's happening in St. George? Do you have like a specific thing that you're trying to? Do you stick with just restaurants and then you work backwards from restaurants, or like what makes you decide?
It's anything that I know of that I include, like. So
what jumps out at you that's like, hey, this would be an interesting one? Do you think too much about
it's
who
mostly
the viewer is, or are you just thinking?
Well, it's mostly just, so I base it off of how I kind of structure my newsletter, which is just in different areas of town. So like this week, I'm going to be going to Sunset Boulevard, and basically everything that I know about that's happening on Sunset is going to be in that video. It doesn't matter what it is, because
you're driving down Sunset and you're like, oh, I got to see what else do I not know?
I just know pretty much at this point.
Yeah.
I can figure out without going anywhere. I can figure out, unless, because usually people will hit me up now and be like, hey, I just saw this happening, and if I don't know about it, I kind of know I pretty much know who's working on what, to the point where within a few phone calls or texts, I can figure out what's happening.
Yeah.
And then with my newsletter, my newsletter is always, it's constant. And so like right now on Sunset, I know of at least 4 restaurants going in. Burt Brothers is going in. Summit Athletic Club is opening in a couple weeks. So basically what I do, and I rotate throughout the county, and there's not really a rhyme or reason other than just timing what I know is opening. And then I just try and keep tabs on everything, and then every couple months I kind of cycle through. So like Sunset, I probably did, the last time I did Sunset I think was November, October maybe. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's every 3 or 4 months, like downtown. There's so much happening downtown, and I love downtown. Yeah. And there's so much good content downtown. I feel like I'm there once every 3 months. Yeah. But it just depends on the area. Like Exit 13, for a while, it was pretty constant. And then the last year or so, there was a bunch of stuff behind the scenes happening that there was a time period that I didn't get out there for like 9 months. And now I feel like we're on the cusp of a bunch of things happening again. Yeah. But so it just really depends. It depends on announcement times. It depends on, like, everyone's asking about this river crossing right here. I get asked about it almost every day. Yeah. Like, hey, did I miss your video?
I think, man, I'm gonna be in traffic at 5 o'clock every single day. I'm gonna have a stream of cars that I gotta stay behind, and then I always see your posts about traffic and how, you know, St. George word of mouth is always like, I'm so bugged about the traffic. Like, this isn't really traffic.
It's really not.
It's not. And in its own way, it is, right? It's not what a lot of people here are used to. So
For
then,
sure.
you know, the change is something, but this is like a mecca. This is like a whole junction right here.
Yeah, it is.
But the road's going to go through the fields.
Yeah, the road's going to go over to the Exit 5,
Yep.
which would be great.
So it's going to help the flow of traffic right here and going down Riverside and all that other stuff too. So,
but this is one of the most asked about because it's been primed for a development for a long time. And so I get asked about that. But yeah, so I try to stay connected to the people that are doing the projects, whether it's, you know, the actual landowner or the developer themselves, mm-hmm. or, you know, the commercial agents that are working on it, or I don't know. Sometimes it's the guy remodeling, like George Greenwood, that does all the construction on Sunset, for example, is what I'm thinking about right now. He built the Chipotle, Wingstop, and Habit. So I know that he's working on it, so I'll hit him up, or it just depends.
Yeah.
But at this point, I pretty much know who's working on it.
You were born and raised here.
Yes.
And then you went to what school? Pineview?
No.
Dixie.
Of course not. I'm not a Pineview Panther.
Dixie.
Dixie Flyer.
He's a Dixie Flyer?
No, so yeah, I went to Sunset Elementary, Coral Cliffs, 6th grade center. Then I went to Dixie Middle School, Dixie High. Yeah. Served a mission, came back, and went to Dixie State for 2 years, got my associates, dropped out, and was selling door-to-door for Vivint, which is what led me down the kind of building your own life path, like entrepreneurship, sales, whatnot. And then I ended up I started classes for an online sales degree at Weber State, but we started this business that I'm in like 2 weeks before my final semester, so I never got my bachelor degree. You got your degree in doing it, actually. Yes. Like your senior thesis just went right into the business. Yeah, and my MBA, actually, I call it my MBA, was a gym that I invested in prior to this business with a friend, and that is where I learned. That's where I got my MBA. That's where I learned everything from what not to do and what to do in running a business. You know, accounting, tracking. Tracking is like one of the most important things that I think you have to do as a business owner, and we weren't doing any of that, and it led to financial distress, and then just partnerships, everything. I mean, I learned it as I was in school and as I was out selling. That's when I invested in the gym, that turned into really helping run the gym, and that's where I learned everything. Kind of and so when I started this business, it was like I went into it knowing everything that I had failed at in the prior one.
So you've told me the story a couple of different times, but what was it that made you want to, picking title wasn't just out of the blue, right? So like what led you into that title jump, and then why was the timing, what was so important about the timing that you decided to do that?
Yeah, so it was during I bring up Vivint. So when I got home from my mission, I was working at Foot Locker. I was delivering sandwiches for Jimmy John's, and I was going to Dixie State. And I kind of had that lined up, like school in the morning, Jimmy John's during the day. I would do my homework and watch sports and sell shoes at Foot Locker.
Nice.
And then I ran into a friend that I had served with that had gone out and sold for Vivint. And the door-to-door game is obviously like really popular here. There's some good and bad reviews from it. And I always knew that I wanted to do it, but I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to do pest control because pest control I had heard was the easiest sell, and it was the one that you had to be the least shady. And I'm like, well, I'm not a shady guy. And I can't be shady. Like if I don't believe in what I'm selling, right, I just can't. It doesn't come out. Yeah. And so what's funny though is I was signed with a pest control company, and then I run into my buddy at high school football game here. And and I hadn't seen him since we were in Mexico together. And I was like, oh, what have you been doing? He's like, oh, I just got home from selling for Vivint alarms. And I'm like, you're selling alarms? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, don't you have to be shady to be good at that? And he's like, no, dude, because he was like the least shady guy that I knew. Yeah. And so anyway, that narrative got cut real quick. Obviously, in any sales position, in anything in the world, there's going to be shadiness, right? But I ended up meeting with Vivint, and they, the regional, basically the way they sold was exactly how I pictured selling it. I was really passionate about the home automation piece that they had just come out with, which was, controlling everything from your phone. I thought it was really cool. And one thing that he said was, because we were talking, he's asked me my dream. I'm like, my ultimate dream is to buy an NBA franchise. Like, nice. That's what my ultimate dream would be, right? Yeah. And so as we were talking, I had told him that I wanted to do pest because it was the easy sell. So he's like, through this conversation, the way he sold me, he's like, through this conversation, he's like, I don't picture you as someone that wants to take the easy route. Are you someone that wants to take the easy route? And I was like, no. He's like, well,
no one would ever admit that. No one would ever admit that.
And
I'm like, sales question.
And I'm like, okay, it makes sense. Yeah. So anyway, I ended up going out. I ended up making more the first weekend selling than I had in like 6 months at Jimmy John's and Foot Locker. And that's really what flipped my mind on like sales. I had been in some call center stuff prior to the mission and knew that I didn't want to do, phone sales long term, but I was like, I'm going to go do door to door, and this is what's going to help me get through school. I still didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Mm-hmm. But I was like, sales is how I can create the lifestyle I want, and it's how I can really control my own destiny. And it was through Vivint that I set up my first LLC, because we were independent contractors. It's where I kept putting books in front of me. We would go on trips. I was just around guys that were thinking on a different level, right? And that's really what got me into wanting to own a business. I just didn't know what that business was going to be. Yeah. I had invested in the gym, turned into a business owner there, but it wasn't really I had bought into a friend's vision, and but it wasn't really that wasn't my long-term thing. And then in my final summer, I was working at the gym, and I was still selling for Vivint. So I'd come back and forth. And my mom has been in the business my entire life, since before I was born. And the business the title business. And so I came home one time, and long story short, the company she was working for was shutting down. Mm-hmm. She didn't really know what was going to happen, and so I walk into her office the day that they're like shutting down and moving their office, and so she tells me this story, and I'm like, well, what if we just start our own? And she was like, well, you can't just start your own title company. And I'm like, well, there's how many others are in town? Yeah. Someone started every single one of them. Like, why not? And gave me a few objections. And I was like, okay, I'm like, I'm just going to work on this. I'm going to see what it takes. And I'm looking to get out of summer sales. I started summer sales so I could start a business. I've got the cash. Let's just at least try, or at least look at it. And so it was back and forth for a while. I'm like the crazy entrepreneur of the family, and my parents are like the most simple, amazing people in the world. And so there's always like, I don't know where you came from. But it was back and forth with her. It was like on a Wednesday, she'd be like, don't talk to me midweek during the work week. And then Saturday would come and she's like, I'm open to it. And then 2 months later, in August of 2015 is when things came together. And we linked up with guys that had offices up north that we could operate and own the one down here and be up and running within a few days. One of the objections, or one of the hurdles, was it would take like 8 to 10 weeks for licensing and all that kind of stuff. And we didn't want all of her current client stuff to go find somewhere else, or her current assistants to, have to go find something else, or
in the interim, the gap.
Yeah. So we bridged it really quickly, and we were up and running. And that's when I started. I had no idea what the world. I knew real estate. I had bought my first property. I was into real estate investing. But I had no idea. I had friends that were real estate agents and lenders, but I didn't know just like most of the world, I didn't know what title was. And then it ended up, so I took you have to take a marketing test. I didn't study, I just went and took it, passed it by 1. Nice. And I was off to the races trying to figure out how to build value. And that's what I've really tried to do in the last 8 years, is really just build value and reciprocation of. And that's why I started the newsletter and the videos, was a way to reciprocate. We have all these people that send us business, and it's really hard for me to reciprocate. In the world that I'm in, we're very restricted, by marketing laws and regulation and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so I really wanted a way that I could provide resource, information, give back to the people that are giving. And that's what led me to the newsletter and the videos, was like a way that a lot of companies put out stats, and I just didn't want to be another stats guy. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to figure out a way that would keep people interested in what I'm doing, and build myself as like a real estate expert rather than just a title expert, because I knew that would limit myself. Mm-hmm. And so that's how we started. And she's the one that's over all the transactions. I'm the one that runs the business and gets new business in the door, business development, relationships, and we've built a team, and it's been awesome. It's been like the best thing that ever happened for my family.
Yeah, that's awesome.
For sure.
I mean, the interesting thing is that like there's all these rules on title that don't allow you to collaborate with other people within the industry, right? Lenders, and then also real estate agents, because that's kind of like the 3 legs, right?
Yeah.
Your real estate agent, a mortgage lender like Guild Mortgage, they're letting us use a conference room, but what are the rules in allowing like different co-brandings, and how do we get information out there? But you found a gap, and then you just stood in the gap. And the gap was real estate agents are also really horrible, notoriously, for newsletters, because they just steal somebody else's idea. Yeah. They just steal somebody else's idea, and then they just run with it. And then normally it's not very dynamic, but you've been able to provide that to the agent, and then you've never asked for anything in return, which I think is the coolest part about the whole thing. Yeah. Is that there's no quid pro quo, right? There's no like, here, if you do this, I'll do this. Right? It's always been like, hey, let me just give you value. I'll give you this tool. You can go talk to your clients about it, about what's happening, stay relevant outside of, hey, this many homes sold, this many have gone under contract, and the stats thing that you're talking about.
And that's what's led me, because it started out as like a real estate community thing.
Right.
But now, like, this has got me, the network that it's built for me, both in real estate, but in the local business community, and also like the city governments, the city councilmen, the mayors, even the governor. that's what's really been really cool to see. And part of because part of the reason why I think it's been successful is just like with, I haven't asked anybody in return, like in regards to the people that I'm sending it to, but at the same time, like when I go into a restaurant, I'm not asking for like some free thing, some an influencer.
Name a sandwich after you or something.
Yeah,
right?
or like I'm not asking for any of that. I'm not asking for free stuff. Sometimes I'll get free stuff and I'll accept it, but like when I went into a restaurant the other day in Kanab and I was like, I'm paying, like I don't want to, I want to support these people, right? And that's one thing that I think a lot of business owners appreciate, that as I'm gathering this information, some of them do ask like, oh, like how much is this going to cost? And I'm like, I just do this for like, it's a marketing thing for me, and it helps me grow my business and my network, but I'm not asking any of the business owners to pay anything or to sponsor or do anything. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's led to just the organic growth and the organic relationships that I have with people. Like the lady I met that just opened Arrows and Antlers just down the street, down by Ahi's little candle making studio, and I was able to go in and check out the store and like become friends with her. And it's just, and so I meet all kinds of business owners, which are the people that I want to surround myself with, right? Mm-hmm. But then also, like I say, with the government and with the people that are because there's political dynamics of a growing town. Crazy. And I'm right in the middle of that conversation all the time.
You are always in the middle of that conversation.
And I love providing my take on it, because I feel like a lot of times growth gets, it just gets misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And even politicians and, or like the city council, city staff, city manager, a lot of them get really misunderstood, or there's just a lot of polarizing stuff, right? And I've never been a polarizing guy. I've never been a hardcore Republican. I've never been a hardcore Democrat. I've just always kind of been this guy that's in the middle, that sees good on both sides and sees some reason and some logic in between all of the mess, right? And I'd rather be like, I actually was reading a book this morning. It's called No Bad Parts, that talks about the story of sharing a story of interbeing versus a story of separation. And most of the world is focused on that separation, whereas I've just always tried to be a connector. Well, we talk about connecting, right? Yeah. But I've always tried to be the one that kind of gives a more collaborative approach, which I think can be done in city dynamics of growth, or even on a national level of politics, that I don't love to get into. But locally, it's the most important. Like, local politics are way more important, in my opinion, than the national, because there's so much actual impact.
It's like our
by decisions. Our voices are so much heavier locally. And so sometimes the voices that you hear locally are the very polarizing ones as well, that sometimes, can sway, by, not necessarily manipulation or by, but like when you have a polarizing mind, there's not that collaborative spirit, right? And so whenever I'm posting about something or trying to, weigh in on something regarding growth in St. George, I try to do it from a collaborative, open-minded outlook, which I really love as well.
What we talked about connectors. So, what have you always been a connector? Has that always kind of been your a thing that you've tried to do? Is keep that collaboration, or have you just seen like, hey, I can see how there's a need for it, and in your mind, what do you mean by, connecting? What is it that you're trying to connect?
So, as far as I've learned a lot about connecting just through this business, because as a local business owner, networking, especially in St. George, is like, if you're not networking in St. George as a local business owner, you're probably missing out on a lot of opportunities and a lot of business, because it's about who you know, and it's about the relationships, and that's really for any town in America. But I feel like St. George's is this networking, just that like I don't know. It's very important here. And so when I started the business,
I look at St. George. So I call it an island in the desert.
That's
because
a good way to put it.
It's the exact opposite of a normal, like an island surrounded by water. We're like an island surrounded by sand with not enough water, right?
Yeah.
It's like this weird inverse inverse example, but we have 2.5 hours to another state, right, in Vegas, which is the next biggest metro. And then you legitimately have to drive 3.5 to 4 hours up north to find a larger population that would be able to support us, right? So we're legitimately, we might as well just be on a deserted island.
Right.
So everything that happens here happens right here, like down the street from you. You know, the people.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of why I wanted to start. You know, this is like the second podcast, right, that I've done on specifically like Washington County, Southern Utah specifically, because all of the decisions that we make from like the government level, even decisions they make at the state level, all that stuff comes trickling down and it really impacts our everyday life.
Yeah.
You know, from the food that we get, the cost of goods that we get, to the developments that decide to go in, how fast do we grow, what's the, property taxes, all that stuff is really, our whole livelihood. It can be managed right here. We need some support, right? We need some support, but the vast majority of everything we need to exist and survive is right here. But goes all the way back to the pioneers, right? They couldn't just send a quick telegram up to Salt Lake and be like, hey, we got malaria down here. Can somebody help us out, right? Like I was reading the history of Washington City and how like the cotton factory, the cotton mill, basically, it kept the entire mission alive because of its ability to keep producing money and progress and growth, right? If it wasn't for that growth early on, none of the settlers, whether it was Santa Clara or whether it was, the Washington City mission or the ones that are out, the Springdale mission and some of the other ones that were kind of all scattered along the outskirts, none of those would have survived if it wasn't for that like, central growth. And we only could do it ourselves. There's I think the Santa Clara, they tried to dam the Santa Clara River, I think 4 or 5 times between 1890 and 1910. And it was every 2 or 3 years, the dam would fail. And I just kept thinking imagine if that was today. Okay, we got all this runoff going to happen, and the dam, gun lock, right? Something happens, and then there's a massive flood, and then a human male is going to have to, for the next summer, go build another dam because the water that we have is the water that we stop, and we would all have to do it. We'd have to stop what we're doing. We couldn't farm. We couldn't, do marketing videos or anything. We're all out there with a shovel trying to put this dam together. And I can't help but think back in those days, we were living so hand to mouth and we've gotten so spoiled, but the dynamics, the underlying dynamics is that growth and that progress for us to keep going and surviving, we have to continue to grow, right?
Yeah.
And so how do we navigate that? Because most people maybe not most people, but the two lines are we either have to grow or we have to completely stop growing. And those are the only two options, right? And so it's this never-ending battle. And you are for sure a pro-growth guy, right?
Yes, absolutely. Just because I feel like if you're not growing, you're dying in some fashion. Not that we have to go gangbusters on the growth, but there has to be responsible growth, because then if you shut off growth, there's other problems that will come, because we do live on an island that is one of the most desired little islands in the entire country.
Yep.
And just because, if we were to shut off growth, doesn't mean people are not going to stop coming here. So then you have other issues with, we talk about affordability. Affordability is already a problem. If we were to stop building it, just because we stop building doesn't mean that people are going to be like, I'm going to check that off my list. I can't go to St. George. It's no, if I can afford it, I'm going to go there. And the affordability factor, because you do have wealthy people that continue to see this place as a destination, that there's just other problems that come with it. So you just have to responsibly grow. And that's what I'm all for. And that's what I feel like I don't feel like any city in our county is doing anything anything that's not responsible. I think everyone's trying to figure out how to navigate all the growth, because you can't just say, oh, sorry, no more building permits.
Right.
Now, I understand the water dynamics, and I understand that, you know, there could become a time that that has to happen. But the last couple of years, I think, and this was what leads to the polarizing of anything in life, because there are videos where I get the polarizing crowd that just wants to harp on water and wants to harp on all the issues.
I wasn't even gonna bring up water, but now.
And I don't even want to. I don't want to talk about water.
We always get to water. But what about water?
But that's where you have to have some reason and logic, and that's what I've always. That's just what I've always tried to lean on, versus coming into something that's, you know, anti anything. I feel like there's got to be there's a way to compromise. There's a way to move forward without having to rip each other apart, right? And I feel like growth is one of those topics that can easily be railroaded by the polarizing crowd on either side, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I've and going back to the question on if I've always been that way or if I've always been a connector, I will say prior to my, growing up, I wasn't trying to connect people in business, but what I was I was always with friends, and to the point where my parents, we finally finished our basement and made it really cool at our house my junior and senior year, and then we'd all be at my house. But growing up, I was always down the street, and my parents would always be like, why can't you just hang out here? Why can't you hang out with us? And I'm like, I want to be with my friends. So then that was our compromise, right? We created a basement where everybody wanted to be at. Yeah. But I've been referenced by my friends a few times as like the glue to, like, there was something that we did a couple years ago, and they were like, if you're not in, then
no one else is
it's not going to happen. Because then, not that I was like the guy that everybody wanted to be with, but I was the guy that cared a lot about my friends and about hanging out and about everyone being involved. And I think that the nature of that is what led me into, because really it's all about my friendships. It's who I work with and who I interact with every day are all my friends. And I really care about connecting either through experience, whether we're going to a new restaurant or we're playing at a new golf course or we're just hanging out, or connecting through information, connecting through business referrals. I really just try to have that mindset amidst all the crazy that's out there, right?
I think the interesting thing is that so I didn't even move to Southern Utah until 2015. So right as you were getting your business rolling, I had just moved here. Got my real estate license, and I knew nothing about real estate. And I think it was probably 2016, 2017 when we first started we'd hang out kind of semi-frequently. But then it was like 2018, 2019, we were going to breakfast on a regular basis. But it was like the second I met you, it was like, oh man, I just it's like a built-in friend. It's like somebody that you could just easily have a conversation with. There's like never any difficulty. You were always curious about what was going on with me and what my business was doing. But it wasn't because I was in real estate and you were in real estate. It was like, hey, you're a business guy, I'm a business guy, but we'd end up talking about
we talked about
anything and everything, dude. We've talked about everything, right? We talked about crypto. We'd get together and we just talked about crypto forever, and there's always something that you've been able to connect with somebody on that wasn't necessarily what you were interested in talking about. It's always like you come out of curiosity with everybody you talk to. It's like my favorite thing about you, dude, which is why I think you end up being that glue, right? Because it's not Macrae's agenda and then we're going to go forward. It's like, hey, what do you want to talk about today? And then let's just keep rolling with that, right? And so that relationship has always been really easy, which is why, man, you were the first person I thought of when I was like, who do I want to interview? It's Macrae, because he's always asking about everybody else, but that opportunity and the flip side to it I felt good about that. So what do you want to do next? Like, what are you gonna do next? Because truthfully, man, let's be honest. the title company operates 90% without you.
Yes.
At this stage, which it's taking a while to get there. It's not like it just happened overnight. What do you want to do next?
So that's always going to be the central piece for me. But as I've mentioned, I've been into real estate investing since prior to being in the business. I've got a portfolio of rental properties that's been most of my experience so far. They're all long term. I had an Airbnb for about 2 years, 3 years, but I sold that last spring.
After a fire.
And yeah.
After a fire.
Had a fire, went through the whole gamut, and it was great, and it appreciated really well, and we sold, and it was awesome. But really, my focus is going to remain in real estate, as we know, with my business as the centerpiece to that. But I would love to get into, and so I bring up real estate investing because I've got a portfolio of mostly single family. I've got a few multifamily stuff, and I'll continue building that. But as I go, I could potentially sell and 1031 or level up into either bigger developments, bigger investments. But I do have some ideas for Southern Utah in regards to developments. I would love to be a part of a development from like the visionary ground up, like be a part of the group that develops something. And so I don't know what that's going to be yet. I've got some ideas and always looking for opportunities. But I don't know, I did dip into crypto a little bit. I've invested, I've mostly set up all my exterior, because yes, my company essentially runs, I have an amazing team. I'm the one that gets the business in the door a lot of the time, and I'm the one that maintains those relationships, and that is a job. But as far as the transactions that happen, I've got an amazing team that, you're right, most of the time I don't have, it's running without me. But it is what keeps me involved here locally, and it is what will, like I said, will always be the centerpiece. But it's also the piece, like I've gotten a few of my rental properties because of that position that I'm in, because someone will call me, I have a fourplex just down the street. Someone calls me and they're like, hey, I'm looking at listing this for sale just by myself on Zillow. Can you tell me I can't remember even what the question was. Can you tell me what the taxes are? Or can you tell me how I'm vested on title? I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I look it up and I'm like, oh, is this a fourplex? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, so you haven't listed it yet? And they're like, nope. And I'm like, don't list it? What are you asking? They tell me, I'm like, I'm going to go look at it right now. 6 hours later, we had a contract, and I closed 2 weeks later. And it was, and so it's opportunities like that that keep me involved locally, and that keep me involved investment-wise, because that was, the definition of a pocket listing, or something that hadn't hit the market yet, that would have. This was at the end of 2020. That thing would have had 35 offers on it probably. And anyway, lucked out. And so, but development is in my what do you call that? Not rear view. Is in my
the future, man.
The future.
Your vision board is like, hey,
yeah.
I want to do a development. I want to drive by a thing that was once dirt. And now it's like a living organism, but yes. it's real estate. I'm the exact same way, man. Yeah. And I've ran down dude, development is the worst. It's the worst part of real estate, and also has so many great elements to it and can be so exciting. But I completely understand where the shrewdness, the public perception around developers, right? Like Whenever I read articles, it's always like this group called the developers.
I know.
And it's like this like imaginary like monster of people. We were talking a little bit before we hit play, but the city of Ivins is doing a talk about, right? And the first one they did was on water specifically, and then the second one was just the other day they did on housing, and then they're going to do one on, you know, financials and how do we manage the city budget and stuff like that. So they want the community to be involved in this, which is so awesome because you go from a city, you know, I moved here from Huntington Beach, California. Previously to that, I lived in Tustin and Irvine and some of these massive cities in Southern California, but I grew up and I went to school in a really small town in New Mexico, which is at the same time in 2000, you know, between 2002 and 2005, it was like identical to the size of St. George, right? And so it's that small town feel. But Ivins City, I think it has like, I think they only have like 600 employees in the entire city. I think you know the stats a little bit better.
And probably
maybe less.
Maybe less.
Maybe less. Like humans working in the city is right, like less than 1,000, right?
Yeah.
So it's for sure a small town in Middle America, and it's 5 minutes up the road. And the mayor is there with all these, you know, our state representatives, you know, all these experts in all these different fields, and we went from a city with a small population, but access to like experts at the top level of their game.
Oh yeah.
And that couldn't have happened 20 years ago. It was impossible to happen where you could get such a small town, but have real experts at the really highest level participating in the discourse of city management and city development. And the whole time you hear, you know, when the Q&A starts, developers don't do this, right? They're greedy. All they want is the most.
All they want is money.
It's like,
profit.
well, when you put on that developer hat and you start running down the road, right? So I met with the city of Washington, and it's just the first stage. You just meet with the development team, the city development team, and they have 10 people every single week that meet in a room and just listen to whoever has an idea. That's literally all that there is. Right. You give them a write-up as to what you want to do. You have the parcel. You do a little bit of research, but then they say, hey, let me help you in whether you should move forward with this or not, right? Let me answer questions you might not have considered yet, and then you can come back the next week if you want to do it that way, right? And so it's this collaborative approach on the city side, but then the developer, once they start into the game, now they're managing 50 different, rules. You have parking rules, and you have electricity, and you have water, and you have power, or gas. And then, okay, what's the traffic situation going to be like at this particular property? What's the zoning? What do the residents around it want versus what the city wants versus what, the Joe down the street that has no connection to it whatsoever, their opinion is going to be on it, right? And then all of a sudden, you go down and a 2-acre parcel, so this is a recent one, 2 acres. It's nothing huge. It's not this corner right here. It's a third of this. And it's like $8 million, it'd be like an $8 million development just to build it, mm-hmm. right? $8 million. And 2 years at a minimum. 2 years just to get the electric meters, just to be able to do energy meters, right? So as a developer, like knowing all those huge hurdles down the road, how do we streamline that, but then also make sure there's those checks and balances along the way? It's a headache, dude.
Dude, I give props.
Isaac Barlow, man. Oh my gosh, I can't believe he's taken on a project that I'm like,
this pretty much impossible.
It's pretty much impossible, or you're just asking for a really difficult road, right? To do a huge development like that.
And that's where, when I see people, whether it's Facebook or whatever, making comments about developers and how they're just greedy, and it's or the city officials and how they're just getting,
trying to line their pockets,
and how they're the worst people on earth, right? It's so funny because I know all these people, all the people that get dragged. For the most part, I've met all of them. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, I actually have really good relationships with all of them. Mm-hmm. Whether I'm working with them or not, I know all of them. Mm-hmm. And they're all some of the best people that you could ever meet, for one. For two, they've taken, like you mentioned, a really, really, really hard road. And 3, they've built out all the fun and cool and awesome stuff that we have are the developers are the reason why we even have anything. Yeah. The buildings, the restaurants, all the entertainment,
the parks, just like doing like the sports centers, like thinking the amount of energy and effort it takes to go build a sports park or like a pickleball courts.
Yes,
you know, all those
abilities park for the kids.
It's just as difficult to do that as
Washington
to do a
Wheels Park.
Yep, the Wheels Park.
All of it is created by people that get dragged on a daily basis, and that's one of the reasons. That's one of the things that really fires me up, and that honestly I sometimes have to like hold myself back from unleashing, because I hate when people get dragged that I know don't deserve it.
The funniest thing is that you're the exact opposite. Like, you're always the one that's like the happy, optimistic. Every time I see you post something, I'll text you something that's super negative, and then you'll like twist it around and do it positive. Because I'm the opposite. I like to point out, and like I'm pretty skeptical, right? So
yes.
I'm gonna point out where some roadblocks are gonna be. But man, you've always presented yourself as like the positive.
And I am the opposite. Yeah. I actually sometimes it gets me in trouble because I'm not skeptical enough, but I've learned through the experience of I see the good versus seeing the bad at first, and sometimes it gets me in trouble because I trust way too much, because I feel like someone can trust me, so I have to feel that way, you know, about anybody. And and so, but I sometimes it's harder for me to get to that positive post or that positive outreach, because I do see people getting dragged, you know, like the St. George City manager last year, and it seriously fires me up, dude. Yeah. And I have to refrain sometimes, because what I want to say is not as much of a positive. It's not that it's not positive. It's just more so like, it's just more aggressive. And I don't ever want to, you know, I don't want to ever be that person that's like, I don't know, that's just going nuts online. Yeah. But the city officials.
You want to have a constructive conversation moving forward.
Like, constructive conversation, and when it's out of anger or frustration, that never leads to a constructive conversation. Right. So that's why whenever I'm speaking publicly on something, I don't want it to be out of frustration or anger. But when I see some of the people that get dragged, when I know their intentions, I've sat down with them, I know what their plan is, I know what the city officials are, you know, what their mindset is, what they're thinking. It's all so positive. And so when I see them get dragged, it hurts me, because I feel like, if I was in that position, I would. That's why I always say I'm not running for city council, I'm not running for mayor, I'm not doing any of that.
We talked about this.
Because I don't think I'd handle that very well. But
you wouldn't handle somebody saying something disparaging about you, or misrepresenting you,
misrepresenting me, or that, and just my response.
Like how you would control
how I would respond, how I would control it. I could control it, but when it's coming at me, or when half the population hates you no matter what, I don't know. I just don't think that I could handle that.
That's not the environment that you want to put yourself in.
Right. Yeah. But that's going back onto the subject at hand. The developers that are creating these cities are some of the best people that I've ever met, and that's why I want to support them as much as I can, because I feel like they're just battling. I always say, like, even home builders, when you're the guy that has when a home gets built, or when a commercial development happens, there are hundreds of people that you have to depend on to do their job to get to that final result. And it is a modern day miracle, that, especially with the way people are, these days, or can be these days. It is a modern miracle that a development even happens, because of the timing. And that's why I always try to have all the sympathy in the world for timing issues. People get berated as well. Berated, is that the word?
Yeah. Sure.
For timing. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, you have no idea what that owner or that contractor is going through.
And what they're in control of.
And what they're in control of, yes. Mm-hmm. Because they're depending on hundreds of different people, from the city mm-hmm. to the subs, to the suppliers, mm-hmm. to everything. Mm-hmm. So it's a miracle that we even get stuff open. Like, it really is. Yeah. And because I know what goes into all the different workings of a development, even just a home builder.
You think going after the pandemic, right? I remember Chris Connor's Farmstead Bakery telling me how he was literally making almost daily runs down to Vegas to get just cups, just styrofoam cups.
Same with Gaia's.
Gaia's too, the same thing.
Going down and getting food from Vegas, which doesn't help with their... I mean, they're buying
food costs. Yeah, you're
retail.
buying it, or just barely under retail. But by the time you drive it up and all the time you spend to get it here just to serve it to the customer, right? All you're doing is breaking even, if that, right? Yeah. Just to keep your business going, right? And so
it's tough, and that's why I have so much sympathy for restaurants. Well, and pricing and timing.
Business owners as a whole too, on an island, right? Like, I'm curious, how do we start insulating ourselves from some of those outside forces and some of those outside issues? Because as we continue to grow, my thought is this, what does it mean to have responsible growth? What does it mean to you to have responsible growth? And if we're going to put water over here, because you and I will talk water later, if we put water to the side and say, what are all the other functions that are required of growth to happen? Are we doing enough to support the infrastructure and support ourselves in that we don't get too far over our skis, like what happened in 2008, where it was probably 30% of residential homes in Washington County were in foreclosure, okay, and just mm-hmm. not too long ago. Now, we're not in, as we've gone into a recessionary period with this economic cycle, like, we're not seeing foreclosures at the moment. But the idea that it's such a fragile system to where a little bit of a supply issue could all of a sudden start tipping dominoes over, what do you think we could do in setting up the pieces better for that future growth, like laying a better foundation down? Do you think there's some things that we're missing?
Well, the supply chain, and that's one thing. So this is an area that I don't fully comprehend and this is why I have sympathy for the people that do have to deal with, like, supply chain and all that, because I don't. I have zero. I don't have supplies. I don't have inventory. I order paper, which actually my supplier just recently told me, he's like, I don't know, like, where. Like, we're having a hard time getting paper. But that's been my biggest thing, is like, and we've never gone without paper, right? And we're digital anyway. I shouldn't even be having to buy stacks and stacks of paper.
Right.
But I do still, because we still are in kind of a dinosaur industry.
Well, but then also at the end of the day, the digital goes so far. Where do we still kind of have a record?
Yes.
Especially when it comes to property records, right? Like,
totally, for sure.
Yeah.
And so, and there's a bunch of fraud right now happening that digitally can be done. We just had one that came across. We can talk about this too later, but fraud. But going back to the supply chain, I haven't really personally had to deal with. So I haven't really. I mean, I know because we're on an island and we don't have, Vegas is, you said 2.5 hours. It's an hour and a half, by the way. We're closer.
Hour and a half to what, though? North Vegas?
I can get to the Strip in an hour and a half. Easy.
All right. Fair enough.
Unless it's on a Sunday, or I guess coming back from Vegas, unless it's on a Sunday after Taylor Swift, then you're stuck. You're stuck for 3 hours.
T-swizzle.
Yeah. So, but because we're on an island and because And this is why some like the big restaurants, some of the bigger business hasn't come here. We're growing up, and that's part of the political dynamic that's really hard, because we are growing up, and there is that pull back to the backwards, but then we want to go forward. And how do you manage that? I know that part of, like, with restaurants, and it's getting better. And I bring up restaurants because this is what I feel like with supply chain is what I can relate to the most, because I've talked to so many of them. It has been hard being in this little bubble, this little island.
Yes, there's a gap here.
There's a gap.
Yeah.
Like, Vegas gets all this distribution, Salt Lake gets all this distribution, and you would think that it makes sense. We're right along that trajectory. Why is it such a hard time getting supply here? But we are on a little island that's just not quite big. Mm-hmm. Us that have been here, I've been here my whole life. Yes, we're getting big, but we're still small. Yeah. Just like the traffic problems are still relatively small compared to where other parts of the country that I've been in. So I think part of it is that we are on an island, and there's not really much we can do about that other than just continuing to, I don't know, build out those processes to be able, I don't know. That's a good question.
It's an interesting thought, because, as we have responsible growth and what that looks like, it's one thing to say, build, baby, build, and then another thing to say, okay, once we get to this level of population, these are the things that are going to have an infrastructure around it, which is why, those city roles and those planners and the decisions that we make on a monthly basis are going to impact us. And truthfully, like, looking back, we mismanaged water for the better part of 2 to 3 decades, right? And really from the 80s through the 2000s, we made some progress with certain reservoirs, but we didn't follow a growth trajectory that we should have. Which I did that interview with the governor back in 2019. I think you were on that one. We were talking about the Lake Powell pipeline. Like, we've been cashing in on that's going to happen, right? To where it didn't really require our cities to do anything, and then now all of a sudden we're like, everybody's got to make some changes, right? My concern is, do we have enough conversation going that's skeptical enough to say, okay, what are the biggest priorities in those in that growth stage, and what should we be focusing on to make sure that we can get the essentials all within the community? Because I'm in the camp that Washington County can provide its own food, keep its own water, supply its own suppliers for all the businesses that we need to operate and grow, right? Like, the essential parts of life, we can all house here, but what that requires is a collaborative approach from city to city, right? Whether it's Ivans over here and, even Gunlock, right? From Gunlock all the way out to Springdale, like, what can we do as a Washington County community to make sure we're supporting all those little middle pieces? Yeah. And that's where, it's a collaborative approach, just to kind of like what you're saying. Yeah. And those movements require guys like you and connectors to be able to say, hey, let's put people that are not normally in the same, normally they wouldn't crash into each other, like these different industries, and we have different bubbles, right? We have tech bubbles, and we have real estate bubbles, and we have hospitality. How do we crash those things together and get that conversation going, dude? And I think you're one of the biggest connectors to those whole things. So it's a big
conversation.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult road.
And it's a super difficult road, because, and I'm not even saying let's go gung-ho on building, because when we talk about growth, it could be residential growth or it could be commercial growth, mm-hmm. right? The thing that I think lacks, and not everything, not every aspect of commercial, but there are a lot of areas of town that lack commercial options, which has led to some of the, like we talk about River Road right here, going up. A lot of this traffic right here, at 8 or 9 in the morning when people are going to work, and at 5, mm-hmm. that's one thing. But if we had more commercial options out where out in Little Valley, out in Washington Fields, and out in some of these other perimeters, that's where I feel like we're a little underbuilt. And that's what creates the exit 10, and that's what creates the exit 8 and this River Road traffic jam, because everyone's going to the same place, pretty much the same place to eat and shop. And there's some, we've got Lynn's and we've got Smith's and some, but still, it still requires just enough pull into here that's what creates the jams sometimes, right? So when I say that, as far as growth, I feel like we're underbuilt commercially in certain areas. Residentially, I don't think we're underbuilt, but I do think that we have to continue building, or we're going to get in the same mess that we were in 2020, because of the fact that we were already underbuilt as a whole state and as a whole country. The whole country's underbuilt. Yeah. But as a state and as a county, we were very underbuilt, which led to that 2020. And the paradigm of everything completely changed in 2020 anyway, because that's when the whole world decided to move here. Yeah. And that's when everything got bogged down, and that's when the growth narrative really increased negatively, because there was a lot of cons to that, right? There's a lot of pros, but there was also a lot of cons, because everything was just so bogged down, and everyone was so inconvenienced that now everyone's like, oh, get out of my backyard. Like, I'm a NIMBY now, right? Not in my backyard.
I hate that word, by the way.
But so that's where I feel like residentially we have to keep, and it scares me honestly, that in a way that everyone has stopped building residentially, because of the fact that I know how underbuilt we are, and that if for some reason we get through this whatever it is that we're in, if we get out on the other side of it and we're still alive and we're not dead,
asteroid hits or something.
Yeah, half the world thinks, then I really feel like it's going to lead to even more affordability issues, because the projections for population for this place out to 2050 are not, the increase is not small. Yeah. The increase is very large, and this place is not going anywhere. And so if we don't have any homes for people to any new homes, we could just get into that same issue that we had in 2020.
The affordability and supply and demand, right? Charging that growth boom. Over the course of 3 years, we had 96% appreciation from 2019 to 2022, April to April, 3 years, 96% appreciation in home values.
It's crazy.
That was just the median home sale. So in some price points, it was higher.
Right.
Right. And as we've started to pull back over these last 9-10 months, I just we put an offer in on a house that's $350,000 for a first time home buyer, and they're competing with 3 offers. Yeah. Still.
Oh yeah.
Still.
Multiple offers are back.
Backup
offers are back.
Multiple offers in certain price points, and then it's a wasteland at the top. All the luxury 7,000 square foot homes that we've built. If you're looking at over $1.5 million, homes that are valued at $1.5 million, there is not very many people wanting to buy that at the moment.
It's more so, and just from what I've gathered, it's the 900 to 1.2 that is just way more, and there's a lot of 900 to 1.2s that should not be in that range anyway, but because of because of 19 to 22, and because of lot costs and building costs and everything, you had a lot of people pushed into that realm, which before it was like, if you're building $1 million house, that is a luxury house, right?
That was a luxury house, yeah.
Now, a lot of times, that's still a really nice house, obviously, but you're looking at maybe some Ramblers that are 3,000 square feet that could be priced in that in that range, right?
Just like it's a normal
and
house.
So I feel like just from my gathering, and I'm not on the MLS side, and I'm not actually seeing the numbers as much as you are, but I feel like if it's priced right above 1.5, those are actually the ones that are moving. If they're not priced right, then forget about it. But it's that 900 to 1.2 that even if they're priced right, there's like 9 or 10 months worth of inventory in that range, or more. I think
it was 11.
11. I think there's like 90 available, and it's 9, and it's about 9 per month, so about 11 months worth. That you have your pickings in that for sure. So if you're not standing out, you're going to be sitting for a while, and especially if it's not new. If it's not new-ish within the last couple of years, and you're in that range, really tough. Yeah, it's really tough.
It's tough. So we have these like markets that come and go, but let's I really do want to get to know a little bit about you, your wife, the kids, the family. All right. Because the real estate side, you're always talking about the real estate side, but you got your daughter.
Yes.
How old? She's almost 1? No.
She's 14 months tomorrow.
14 months. Just turned 1. How has that changed?
Oh, man.
The Macrae from selling Vivint, and like 9 years later, now what did that do? What did that do to you? And
dude, I'll have a hard time not getting emotional, honestly. That little girl is like everything.
She's adorable, by the way.
She is, man. She's like perma smile for me. Like, and we have such a good. I just spent a week with her. My wife Shan went to Hawaii for a week, and I got to keep her here, and she came to the office with me. I was kind of doing a little bit of in between nap times. We'd go to the office. She loves to be out. She's just like me. I took her. A lot of times we're doing takeout because I get off work, and
that's why you eat the food, dude. It's all about the food.
Oh yeah. I get off work. I pick something up on the way home, and we eat at home, right? And actually, COVID got us into that routine even a lot more, but I love to go out, obviously, and so does she. And so during that week, I mean, we went to 5 or 6 different restaurants, and every place we'd go, she's just waving, and just everyone around us was just mesmerized by this little girl. And that's how it is. She's the first grandbaby on both sides for both me and my wife, my parents, my family. I mean, it's my family and hers. It's just been this little light of just constant, and she's just the best baby. It's very rare that she's, having a bad day. And that has, I mean, Shan changed my life in general. From 2015, I met her. So 2015 was the year that my life changed a lot, because before that I didn't really have stability. I was a traveling salesman that had invested in a gym, that was hanging out with friends a lot, but I was traveling so much that I really didn't have stability. And I was dating, I had different girls that I dated, and nothing really, because I was gone all the time, it was just really hard. And that's why I knew I didn't want to do it long term, but I really did not have any stability. And even in some of my core beliefs and some of my core habits, because I was on the road all the time. And when I eat out now, I generally try to eat out. I try to generally eat good. But during that time, I just got really lazy with some of my habits, some of my core beliefs, and I was really just all over the place. And so toward the end of 2015 is when I met Shan, and my life went from this like, I don't know what's going to happen on a daily basis, who I'm going to be with, or what we're going to be doing, or what decisions I'm going to be making, to like, these are the decisions I'm making. And Shan really changed my life for the better, 100% on my decision making, stability, everything. And she's really been the anchor for me to be able to build out what I've built, because it does take a lot of discipline, and it does take a lot of habit structure that I didn't have before. And so Shan's been like the best thing that ever happened to me. We waited 5 years. We travel a lot, love to travel. And we had some complications in trying to get pregnant. And so we really started in like 2020, 19, I guess. This is when we started having conversations. That was because we got married in 2017. So we're going on this next month, 6 years. And so it was about year 4 that we were like, oh yeah, let's start thinking about it. But we didn't really do anything about it until 2020, end of 2020, when we were like, oh, maybe let's just go to the fertility clinic. And so Shan went, and everything looked fine. So then I went, things didn't look fine. So I had to go through some stuff. We did it, and we had bought all the IVF stuff, and we're going down that path, even though I was kind of fixing my issue. But then we got the real schedule of it, and it just scared the crap out of us. So we were like, let's just wait. We'll wait 6 more months. The materials are good for 2 years. We'll just wait. We'll just try it for 6 more months, and if nothing happens, then we'll go down that path. That was in March of 2020, or 2021. So it wasn't, 2021. And then in May, we got pregnant 2 months later. Nice. And so happy that we waited, so happy that we didn't just go down the IVF path and that it worked out. Anyway, and so Coco was born last January and seriously changed my life. Like everything, I mean, I was working and I still work hard, but I realized that, and I'm still having a hard time, really. Sometimes I get really bad anxiety if I get behind, if I feel like I'm behind in work, or if I feel like I'm not, if I feel like I'm not doing enough to get business in or whatever I'm doing, I get really bad anxiety, and I'm trying to work through that. But I was working like 7:30 to 6, 7:15, 7:30 to 6, 6:30, pretty much every day, and be honest, 6 you were getting home, but you were probably still doing something right
at home
at
too.
home, sitting on my phone, and I still have sometimes
still hard,
especially
in our business.
But like now I have a morning routine that I wake her up most days, I feed her, and like I'm leave the house about 8:15, 8:30 most days. But and then I'm home. I like my time with her, because she goes to bed at 7:15, is really like 6:45 to 8:15 during the week, and then like at night for the most part. But it has made me realize, it has made me work less or work more effectively, efficiently, so that I can spend that time with her. But like seriously, she is like, the happiness level that she provides, not only me and Shan, but my parents. My parents love being grandparents. My brother Hayden loves being an uncle, and her family as well. And she's great. She'll travel with us.
She's like the new glue for the Heppler family.
She really is. Yeah, she really is. Like, and it's so cool because like my family is small. It's me, my brother, and my parents. Mm-hmm. My brother's single and doesn't have kids yet, and we're older. My parents are older. My dad was older when he had us, and we've always been a little tight-knit family. The business was was the first glue. Yeah. Because growing up, my mom, also because of this business, during the 2000s was my high school and middle school experience, and that was the other boom that happened in southern Utah. And she was working like crazy, and she always felt bad about it, but that's what it required. Yeah. So my dad growing up was my teacher and my coach. And
which is analogous to life, by the way, because like the dad is the teacher and the coach, like in that, at least for my belief system, right? It's like,
for sure.
It's so funny that your dad filled the role where I think the typical dynamic is like the breadwinner is the one making all the money and the one that's like leading the family. And in your situation, it didn't have anything to do with money, but your dad was still the coach, the leader, and he was at home a little bit more than your mom was, right?
Yeah, and so growing up, I spent way more time with my dad than I did with my mom, and because my dad would usually take us to school and bring us home from school, or we'd go to practice right after school, or and he was just the one that was more flexible with time and everything, and so that's who I had the more time and more relationship with growing up. But I always had a good relationship with my mom. I always did. It just wasn't as deep or as much as with my dad growing up.
Just because of the frequency of it, right?
The frequency, yeah. And so that's what's been so cool is that we started this business when I was 25. She's my business partner. It's the best partnership I could have ever asked for. We trust each other 1,000%. We rarely have, all of her strengths are my weaknesses. All of my strengths are her weaknesses. We mesh really well. and the time that we've been able to spend, because we don't get into fights we're yes, business gets brought up when we're hanging out, but at the same time, it's never that it's like bad. It's it's good. And so that's what's been really cool is the last 8 years, I've been able to spend a lot more time with my mom than I have with my dad. I still spend time with my dad, but it's really, and my brother as well. And my brother growing up, I was really into sports, and like
your brother works with you guys still.
Yeah,
too, right?
he works with us as well, so I get to see him all the time too.
So you just got a family business.
And
that's awesome.
it's really cool, and it's really that's what made our glue tighter, and kind of as a whole family. But because we work so much, we actually don't get to, like the last trip we all went on together was Cavs Jazz game when LeBron still played for the Cavs, which was 2017. We've been talking about doing another one, but it's really hard for all three of us to be gone at the same time.
Yeah.
And my parents just they're not like the crazy travel type anyway, like we are. But we do spend time, a lot of time together. And now, but outside of the business, when it was just us, there wasn't that glue like what Coco's brought into this thing, where it's like now we hang out and all attention is on her and it's all about her, and it's like it's the coolest thing to watch them be grandparents and my brother be an uncle, and I love it. It's so fun.
Has it helped you get a longer view on where you want to go and what you want to accomplish? You know, because you talked a little bit about, you know, getting into real estate, but like on the what's next category, right?
Yeah.
Are you thinking about more kids? Do you want to, you know, do you want to set up a situation that's more like your family dynamic with your dad, and where you can be home more as she starts to grow up? Like, how do you see that next 10-year?
Yeah, so that's where I really want to be there for her. I really want to, her and the rest of my kids. We do plan on having more kids. I would say probably 3 is just my guess.
It's on the record now, dude. It's
yeah,
on the record.
That's what we've talked about. Potential. Oh, it's funny. It's like if the next one's as easy as Coco's been,
I probably won't be. At least my experience.
And if it's not, then maybe we'll stick with 2. But I think we're at least 3, potentially 4 is kind of what we've talked about.
Yeah.
And so I do want to be there. I want to be at their games. Yeah. I want to be their coach. I would love to be, you know, their coach at least. Well, the more stories I hear about youth sports and then getting into high school, I don't know how much I want to be like the head coach, but I want to be involved. I want to help. And I want to be there for my kids. And so
even if they don't play sports and they
and even if they don't play school, or if they don't play sports, if it's dance or if it's whatever, I want to be able to go.
Yeah. And
I want to be able to be there. And so what I want to create, and this is what I've really internalized a lot the last year, is I overextended the digital landscape that exists in my head mentally, in regards to business, investments, all that. The time commitment, that's what I have. And this is so I had this same type of breakthrough back in 2017 or 16. We still had the gym. I had started our business and was about a year into it. And then I was doing an Amazon business. 3 very unrelated businesses. And I was trying to juggle all 3. And I was doing all 3 media, like really, mediocrely, or
in a mediocre way,
in
right?
a mediocre way. Yeah,
you're doing lots of things average.
Lots of things average, rather than, and it was kind of just spread out, and it wasn't really tied to each other.
You were a mile wide rather than going a mile deep.
And so once I shut down the Amazon business and we closed the gym, my productivity with our business just went through the roof.
Yeah.
And so that was my first real kind of paradigm shift or breakthrough, was like, okay, I'm just going to focus on this, but then what I do around that is going to be interworked. If I get into real estate investing, that's fine because it's within my realm, right? Yeah. But then, so anyway, I built that and kept building it, and it's really just been real estate focused. But then in 21, I got into crypto. I did some oil investments. And I did a few other things, a couple of private equity deals. and which have all been great except for the crypto one at this point.
Solana to the moon.
It's still going to the moon, but at this point, the time that I spent. So this is where
we
this
talked
was another.
We talked about this. Remember, you called me or we were talking about it. And I was like, I can't keep up with it. It's like,
yes,
it's moving so fast. I got so many other things.
Yes,
I gotta let it.
And that's what I've pretty much at this point. What I've realized is what I want to create is, and this is why I don't really my business is going to be the centerpiece. If I can get into investments or if I can get into a development and be hands-on and not overextend myself time-wise, that's what I would love to do. But what I've really tried to focus on is creating other streams of cash flow, other investments that don't take my time. Mm-hmm. So rental properties, the Airbnb was taking more of my time than I wanted, and I'm like, I didn't want to pay someone the crazy money you have to pay to have an Airbnb manager. So I was like, I'm just going to sell it, and because all my long-term stuff, I look at my bank accounts once a month to make sure money in, money out. I have a manager that manages all of them. Mm-hmm. I don't have to do anything on those. Mm-hmm. My oil investments, I get a distribution every month. Don't have to do anything with those. But the crypto, I got into NFTs and I was flipping NFTs and I still have some. And
it's an active thing.
But it's an active day trading type of thing. And the time that I spent last year on that, it was a real awakening. I'm like, I would come home and I would be able to have the time with Coco, but then after that, it was like, okay, I got to check my wallet when I get out, and it would interfere with me and Shan time. But then also during the workday, I started checking, and I would wake up and I would check it, and it was just this constant checking, constant being involved, and so that's what one of the realizations that I had was I want to, this digital overload that I have in my head, or mental overload between all the different things that I have to keep up with. I want to keep that within a realm to where I'm not going to miss out on future things with my kids.
Yeah. And what's happening in the moment right now, right?
Yes, because that's one thing that I've really tried to work on is being present and in the moment, because I've done some things with my phone so that it's not just buzzing all day, because it would, between text messages and emails and calls. Yeah. And if you notice, I had one phone call, but I have no notifications on for my emails or my texts. Yeah. Because I do want to be more present with who I'm with, and I also want to be and I also just don't want to have that addiction to look at it all the time. Yeah, man. And I still do, but
it's a business owner thing. There's a lot of there is a certain amount of people are relying on me to do the thing that I'm supposed to do every single day, and I've made promises, and I want to do what I say I'm going to do, yes. Right? Which is really the foundation of, in my mind, foundation of success is show up and do something worthwhile doing, right? Do something that's worth doing, and then do what you said you were going to do. And if you just do that every single day, success is going to come out on the other end.
Absolutely. Because especially the second piece, the reliability piece, is what a lot of people lack. Yeah. And that's been one of my focuses, is being reliable to the point of almost destruction mentally for me, because, and I've been, Brad Harker, been having really awesome conversations with him lately. And he's been helping me have some breakthroughs. So this book I'm reading called No Bad Parts talks about how you have yourself and who yourself is just naturally, and then you have these different parts of you that come out, whether it be the anxiety, when you're in that's what creates some of the non-present moments, because you go into these parts of yourself which are not necessarily bad. Because what I told him is, I'm like, we were talking the other day, and my phone I kept getting calls, and it was right in the middle of a Friday that was kind of crazy. And anyway, he could tell that I wasn't there and I wasn't present. I was trying to be present, but it just I'm like, and so anyway, we started talking about this part of me that gets anxiety that becomes not present because of everything that I know is happening on this outside of what is right here. But I have to think, and but what he's like, it's not bad. He's like, that's not a bad part, because that you have to thank that part for being so uptight about your reliability with people. That's what's created the customer service and the success of your business. It's just that you have to really think about, I'm in this with you for what has it been, an hour and a half, and my business is still alive. If people do need something, an hour or two, I used to just think that if I didn't respond to somebody within 2 minutes, I was failing. And now and people always would tell me that. They'd be like, oh, you didn't have to do that fast. And I understand that there are things that are
need to happen
right then, but it's not everything. And I know that also when I walk out of this meeting, I am going to go through that both my texts and my emails,
just to prioritize it,
and make sure that if there's anything that has to be, that's very very urgent, that it gets done. But I've also set up systems where most 98% of people know that if you go through me, like when it comes to business, I'm the middle guy that I'm gonna have to talk to the office anyway. So if they just go right to the office, right to the source, their lives will be better, and so will mine. But there's still some that don't, and which is totally fine. But it's having little breakthroughs like that keep my business growing, but at the same time keep me not being in that anxious part of me that does happen. Because then what happens is, because if I'm thinking about all of what's happening here, or thinking about the people I have to respond to, the person I'm connecting with, there's a good chance they feel my anxiety. There's a good chance they feel like I'm maybe annoyed by the end, because I'm like, I gotta get to my stuff, right? And so I want to, and that limits my enjoyment level. Like when I'm at lunch, or when I'm on the golf course, or when I'm doing stuff that I actually enjoy, it hinders those moments because I'm feeling anxious, and that's what I'm trying to work through right now.
So you think that anxiety piece is one of those your biggest challenges at the moment?
Yes.
Is that one?
Yeah. And it's getting better. And really just having Coco has made that better, because I know that for example, if I do have some hours in a day, or if I go into the office later because Shan's going to run somewhere and have her time, and I'm going to watch Coco in the morning or something like that, I know that when I call someone back and I'm like, oh, I was with my daughter, like who's going to get mad at that, right?
No one.
You know what I mean? Yeah, right. So and honestly, when it boils down to it, it's very rare that when I'm calling someone back, they're like, what the heck? Yeah. Like you didn't, it doesn't ever happen. And so, and it's because of the reliability.
We make those things up in our head a little bit, because we don't want that to happen.
We don't want that to happen.
Right.
And I mean, if it's like 3 days later that I'm like, oh, hey, what's up?
Yeah, that's ship sailed.
Ship sailed, right?
Yeah.
But if it's within a few hours, and that's what I've really just had to be okay with. And same with my email, and because I treat my email like I treat my texts, and all of our office does too. And that's what is really a driving success to our business, is that we are very attentive. Where most people think that if you shoot an email, you're going to get a response 8 hours later. You shoot us an email and you're likely going to get a response within just a few minutes.
Yeah.
And we have a team email address that I'm also on, but things are getting done, and that's where it goes back to the 90% is getting done with or without me, because of the dynamic that we've set up that way. And so a lot of this has just been a work in progress. Like my assistant Ryan too is phenomenal.
That's
and
a lot of
I mean, she's
been with you
unbelievable.
5 years?
2020,
wow.
Just over 3 years, right before COVID.
It's funny because it seems like she's been there.
Been
like a huge catalyst, I think. To
massive,
success, right?
Massive, because a lot of what she does, I used to do, and it would consume so much of my time. But it's they're important pieces. They're essential, but they're essential for somebody if they are reliable like her, and they're an offshoot they're like an extension of me. It took me a little bit to really let it go, but like the delegation, automation, stuff like that sometimes takes a little bit for me to feel completely okay letting go. But then once I let go and I realized that things are still happening, and it's amazing. And I hired her in January of 2020, which was 3 months before COVID, which was 6 months before the boom happened. And I always tell her, we were at 9, we went to 16 from the end from the start of 2020 to the end of 2020 employees.
Wow.
It was like 1 a month for a while, and I probably would have had a heart attack or something if it wasn't for her, because a lot of what she does just took so much off my plate that it allowed me to focus on other things. And that's one dynamic as a business owner that's tough. Like, it's tough when it's a good problem to have, that you're getting so busy that you have to hire somebody, but then it's that delegation.
Like, how do you hand that stuff off?
How do you hand that stuff off? Mm-hmm. And that's where you have to find the real right person, and that's what I did. She's amazing.
So do you think it was handing that stuff off to her? What challenges did you have in that moment? Like, was it pretty natural for you to just say, hey, I need you to do this and this, and she knew what you wanted? Or was she kind of figuring it out? Would you say she was figuring it out as you went?
There was some figuring. I think for the most part, at least the bigger things, the bigger time-consuming things were pretty well known. But then it took it's still like we are. Every day is so different,
it's a running change.
Yeah,
right?
And that's what she's been so great at, is being able to take not knowing what's going to happen, because some people are very adaptability. Because some people want like a detailed to-do list, but then when they don't have that detailed to-do list, it's kind of just like, well, what do I do? Or
I don't know what to do with my hands.
And
just like standing here, right?
And so with her, it's just been. There was things that I knew that I wanted her to do from the jump, and then it was kind of just like, okay, as we go, we'll kind of just figure it out and fill in this gap. And but yeah, she's awesome.
What are you excited about? What's the most thing you're excited about outside of Coco? What's the thing that you're excited about the most within the rest of the year? Like, what's coming up in 2023 that you're excited about?
I mean, a couple different things, but because the uncertainty does affect me, I'm really excited, whether it's 2023 or not. I'm really excited for whatever this is that we're in, some answers, so that I have some more clarity, which I don't need.
I think because the reason I ask this is that I feel like it's foggy for a lot of people.
It is.
A lot of different businesses.
Uh-huh.
Is it like the road forward is completely unknown? Like, we haven't, none of the dynamics that we're facing with, as far as the economic dynamics, the town's dynamics, right?
Yeah.
Like, you got a young family, you're like, that's still foggy, right? Like, you don't know what you don't know as far as like raising kids and
for sure,
and relationships on that end. But I think a lot of people are feeling that way.
And that's been so, and that's why I guess I bring up that getting clarity, because the fogginess has really impacted me a lot. I didn't think it would, and I always said for years, as soon as things turn, that's when I'm going to have my foot on the gas, and I'm going to be faith-based, not fear-based, and I'm going to and it's not going to affect me. We're going to be fine. And we are fine. We have been fine. We haven't had to lay anybody off. We did get slow, but that's
the market's slow. Like, everyone's slow, right?
Yes.
So it's the contraction is equal across the board,
right,
in a lot of ways.
But it has affected me more than I thought that it would. It was really in like August, September of last year, for some reason, that I started just to feel the fear. And I remember reaching out to Justin Prince, who's a phenomenal asset to our community. That on a global level, his mindset is just so big and so positive. And I remember talking to him about having a faith-based mindset of what's to come versus fear. And the funny thing is, I'm like, I know this. Like, I try to, my motto is live abundantly so you can give fearlessly in any regard. But since that conversation with him, that really made me think, okay, I've got to make my decisions with faith, not fear. But then by the end of the year, we went through October, November, December, and it was pretty bleak. Like, there was not much going on.
Well, January, man, we had
January
really low sales.
And so that 4-month stretch, it really impacted me more than I thought. And then the last couple months, as things have picked up, but it was in January that I really started to be like, okay, because it's hard because I try to live abundantly. I try to live, and that's why I look at the positive versus the negative in a lot of things, and I try to, like, when someone asks me to give, like, I want to be able to give, and that's why I say live abundantly so you can give fearlessly, so you're not like, oh, can I give? Can I do this? I just like doing it.
Yeah,
but
just go do it.
But then that's where in my brain I'm like, well, I can't just be 100% go, because there are some realities that my cash flow, my everything could come down.
And you have promises to 16 people
yes.
right now, right?
Yeah.
That you potentially didn't have when it was booming.
Exactly.
And now you have some added pressure.
And that's been the
so you're like, I got to make good decisions for.
I have to make good decisions not only for me but for everyone in our organization, and so it's not just this. And so that's what's been a really hard mental challenge for me and not letting that sink me, because and not letting that cloud my judgment on a lot of different things. Like, right now I'm hoarding a lot more cash than I would like to, but I feel like that's the smart thing to do right now versus trying to go and do things when there's so much uncertainty. But then that's where I really sometimes get in my head, because I'm like, well, I could be like, I'm missing out on investments maybe because I'm choosing to, and then I go back and forth. Well, am I living fear-based or am I living faith-based, and this and that? And so I just have to it's a really hard dynamic for me, and so I've really tried to stay positive and make decisions based on that, which one of those is, we just opened an office in Kanab, and not many people are just wanting to open offices right now, right? And so, but I felt like that was a decision.
In an outlying, it's like, it's an outpost. I mean, truthfully, it's an outpost.
And so it's a
having
decision.
Having a vision and being a little fearless about that.
Yeah.
But saying, hey, I think it's worth, the opportunity's here for us to do it. If we move it now, we're going to look back 10 years from now and be happy that we did that.
And that's where I was going with this whole thing is, if I think short term, it's very scary and it's very foggy and it's very, my judgment is more likely going to be based on fear. But if I look long term, that's where you have to continue with your eyes on, is the long term. It is hard because you can't see over that fog. That fog is so dense right now, and that's one of my biggest, I guess, things that I'm excited for, is to be able to get past that. But then when I say that, though, I think about it and I'm like, well, why am I so focused on that? I should be excited about some of the things. But that's when you asked the question, that was the first thing that came to my mind, because that I can get excited about a bunch of different stuff if we can
navigate through some of the cloud that is right now.
Yeah.
And I think right now too, because of our access to, we're looking at national, we're looking at state, we look at local. It was easy to look at local when we're starting a business. It's easy to look at the relationships that are right in front of us, and then as you remove yourself from the day-to-day, now you get to have, I think Simon Sinek talks about the CEO being the chief visionary officer, and I think it's Infinite Game, right? So he's playing the Infinite Game, right? We're not playing a
visionary and technician.
Yeah, a visionary. So you want to be able to see down that road versus what's right in front of you, and you've transitioned out of that like right in front of you road. So now you're kind of having to push down and see down that vision. And so I think that makes sense, though, right? Is that your excitement's coming out of this, like, hey, I'm going to start having this ability to look past the fog, no matter how dense it is, and see some exciting things around the corner.
Yeah.
What's the most exciting development that you see in Washington County? What do you like? Man, this is gonna be sweet. In 10 years, this part of town is gonna be such an awesome feature to the community.
Downtown
Itself.
Downtown with the extension of Tech Ridge.
Tech Ridge, yeah.
I think that in 10 years it's going to look a lot different,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to. That's the thing I always tell people, because this is one of the kind of battering conversations I've been in, because there's obviously a lot of feelings about how downtown should be, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of people that don't want any big buildings and that don't want anything. They just want what it is, or they want what it was 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. Maybe
50 years ago.
Yeah, or maybe 50 years ago, right. And I understand, and so this is a conversation I could talk about for a couple hours, but
I know we're almost at 2, dude. We're almost at 2.
But downtown has when I was growing up, we were all over this county, me and my friends, because we had friends. We had girls we hung out with at Pineview. We were in Dixie. Most of my friends live in Bloomington. We'd go out to Snow Canyon. We were all over this place. We never went downtown, nor did I ever know anyone that went downtown. If you went downtown, you were going to Pizza Factory at Ancestor Square, and that was it.
That was it? There was nothing else
there
in there,
was
really, right?
There was nothing to do downtown growing up. And so I think back during college and stuff, I'm like, I don't ever remember going downtown. And I'm telling you, we were all over this place. And so what we've been able to build this last decade downtown has been so cool, because my office is downtown, but if I could never leave downtown, I wouldn't. For lunch, for anything. If I could do everything downtown, I would. And for the most part, there's a lot of times that I do. And it's because of all the revitalization. And that's what's hard, because we have all these old historic buildings and we have these empty lots that, to me, look, it's like, yes, those served a purpose and those are awesome, but what if we revitalized it? What if we brought it to life? Yeah. That's what more and more people are doing, and that's part of what's been hard, is either tearing down stuff or redoing stuff. But the end result, like Kairos, for example, or Farmstead, that Jewel Plaza was a battle. Like, there was a lot of people that did not want a 300 apartment complex in downtown St. George. Same with City View,
especially when it was just a burnt down building in the middle of a field.
Exactly. But the benefits from that, the people that get to live downtown and get to walk to all their different, there's a certain person that wants to live in downtown and they want to live in an apartment and they want to live above a bakery. And I will tell you, I was there on Friday morning. That place is like a St. George gem now. Like, you don't come to St. George and not go to Farmstead. The amount of people in that place on Friday morning was insane. And
shout out to Chris Connors,
yes.
Man, you crushed it, dude.
Crushed it. Same with Kairos. Kairos crushed it.
Well, you went from the grill, the burger place, that every time I went in there, which they had great food, like I'd go in there, there was no one ever in there.
I know, and they weren't open very often.
And it was because they had, the excuses. If the previous owners are listening, not to say that it's excuses, but you change the dynamic, you revitalize it with a fresh perspective and a fresh energy. It changes everything, because that place, Kairos, is packed every time I walk, especially if it's nice outside now.
Oh, yeah.
The patio
and whatnot.
It's packed.
Then around the corner, you've got Picarica that's opening in a couple weeks.
I saw the new sign go up. Looks
that's
good.
going to be amazing. And then you have the Wood Ash Rye and the hotel and the apartments right there was all dirt. That corner of Main Street, like, I can't think of a better location, honestly, for like a centerpiece hotel that's an amazing hotel.
Right.
And so there's been all this energy, and I love where the energy is going. I think I know there's more to come. And I'm not saying that I want, because some people, I made a post last year and they said that I was calling for skyscrapers and to become like Salt Lake downtown, or downtown Salt Lake, which neither are the case. A 4 or 5 story apartment building is nowhere near a skyscraper, for one. And but we need that's an essential part of having a downtown, is some clean housing that people want to live downtown. Because I tell people all the time, if you're out in Washington Fields and you never frequent downtown, then why are you mad anyway, right? For one. For two, if you were to go downtown and you were to feel the energy, it's amazing. And if you were to go walk around town square and a lot of those people are living right around there in those apartments, the energy is incredible. And I think that we're on a good path to becoming like an actual downtown where everybody wants to be. And a lot of it is centered on all the restaurants there that are all and the thing I love that they're all locally owned. All the way to Angelica's, everything in Ancestor Square. There's no big chains, and I love that. And I think that if we can continue growing, we can be a
unique metropolitan city. Like we don't, the idea that we're turning into Salt Lake is almost ridiculous, because you look at the dynamics, the underlying dynamics of our community and our economy, right? You're like 40% of our whole county population is over 55, right? Like, our tax base is a residential tax base. It's not a commercial tax base. We have no manufacturing. We have no industry that's really driving any of the economy. So, okay, well, people are going to come here no matter what, right? We know we can't stop development. How do we develop in a responsible way? And if we're going to be a vacation place, let's make the vacation place one that the local community can enjoy.
Right, but then also
and fulfill that need.
Yes.
But allow us to have the hometown people be the one that's leading it, and it's not this, because as soon as you push your affordability out, right? I was looking at the 2-acre development. You start talking about $8 and $10 million for a couple retail places. Not a massive development. $10 million. If we look around town, there's not a lot of people with $10 million lying around. We have to go outside of our area, and then all of a sudden now the people that are calling the shots are not from here. They're not local. They don't live here. You're not going to see them at Costco. You're not going to see them, at the grocery store. We want to be able to have the people that live here reap what has been sown by the pioneers that drove us here, right? I think we could do both, right?
Oh yeah, of course. And that's what I love about the Farmstead story. Is that Chris lives 3 blocks down. He lives in downtown St. George.
Exactly.
And that place is thriving with the local scene loves it. But then the tourist scene, it checks both boxes.
Right.
And that's that's how I travel. When I go somewhere, I'm kind of basing it around on where I want to eat. And I ask people, where should we eat? And I look up and that's what we need more of, because that helps with the tourist infusion. But then it also helps create like street eats out on Sunset, dude. Corey is crushing it. And it's because he also has, and this is what I love about the experience type of a restaurant, rather than just an old restaurant that has some food. And if you want to be successful as a restaurant these days, you have to have the experience with it, and along with the quality of the food, right? But like, that's what I love about Corey, is he has appealed to the local, and like, we're a local community restaurant. But then every time I'm in there, there's someone from Idaho talking to Corey. From Idaho was the last one. They're like, we drove from Idaho to come to Street Eats, and he's like, and they're like, they were kidding, but that was one of their places that when they were coming into town, they heard that they had to go to Street Eats. That's a local place, and that's what people love, and that's what I want more and more of. Is downtown, is more local people doing local shops. Same with like Mofaco or some of the other shops like Rise and Wander. They just opened like a month or two ago. Have all this cool St. George local stuff. Like they're right outside of Ancestor Square. I want more of those types downtown that can stay open, that can benefit by both the local scene and the tourist scene.
And the vacation. That's exciting. I'm excited about Tech Ridge in downtown too.
And then the Tech Ridge continuation of like that whole.
And something that we haven't talked about, but your connection to Silicon Slopes extended out here into the where it's Silicon Mesas, right? Like whatever the ridge is, right? Tech Ridge is bringing in and adding to our economic mix. Historically, it's been construction, medical, and hospitality, retail, right? Those three things have driven the local economy. We know that's not going to survive. Look through the clouds. We know we're not going to be able to survive that forever because eventually construction, we're an island. We're going to get to the point. No one's talking about this. We could talk about this too. I really do want to talk about water because the conversation about water is eventually we run out of water. Eventually we will not have enough water because there can't be 1 million people here, right? We're never going to be 1 million, no. But we for sure could probably get to 300,000. Do we just keep building reservoirs all over the place? Do we have to get another pipe? Like what is it that we would do? What's life in Washington County after we've maxed out? We've reached the edge of the island and the ocean is up on the shores like Hawaii, right? Yeah. Eventually we run out. Then what do we do? And Tech Ridge, in my mind, is a big part of that answer because you educate them at our universities, you employ them up on the ridge, you employ them within the industries that are going to pay them the money and have the ability to live and afford to work here. Exactly. But then it's going to also solve local problems. Like how do we use that stuff to solve our local unique problems, not solve the problems for some other city, across the ocean. How do we solve local? Exactly. And that's what I love about Tech Ridge and kind of that vision that Isaac's got. But dude, we're at 2 hours and you're a busy man.
I know, and
we could have talked for another hour.
Bro. We could talk for another couple hours.
We could.
But yeah, no, and I just to go along with what you're saying, that's why I've been so passionate about that project, and I've become friends with so many people in the tech community because a lot of my friends that are moving back, I say I'm a friends guy. I want my kids to be able to grow up here and stay here, even if they don't want to do what I do. I want them to have the ability to stay here and afford it. But it's really my friends coming back the last couple of years because they can either work from home or they found a job in the tech community or whatever has brought me so much happiness. And everyone wants to come back to St. George. It's just whether or not you can afford it and have a job that will allow it, right?
Yeah.
That's what I love about that. As well as some of the other areas, I think Desert Color has got a lot of potential, both residentially and commercially, with the university going out there, the CT high school, just a lot of, I think that could be, because Tech Ridge, also it's 180 acres. When it's built out, it's done, right?
That's it.
And that could just lead to other places because this tech pipeline that we have from, you can be a 5-year-old going and starting to learn coding at like your Innovation Plaza. You have all this up through the university, and that's where it's so important that we we create all these brilliant kids, and the saying has always been our biggest export is our kids, and that's my biggest passion is Xing that narrative and creating more brilliant kids that stay here because they can. And we will need we will need more. There's a huge, our Southwest Logistics just announced a massive out by the airport in Washington that's going to provide 2,000 jobs.
Wow.
That I think around the airport could have some really big
impact.
different types of technology, and that's why I've become so passionate about that whole industry. And then obviously, of course, your Exit 13 I think is going to have some good stuff. Hurricane, just along the east the Sand Hollow corridor, I think there's going to be some good stuff there all the way out. Hilldale and Colorado City, that area is going to continue to flourish.
Well, I think and going just quickly touching on that, there was articles, this is 5 years ago before when we started like the Big Five campaign, and all of a sudden we ballooned Zion National Park, right? Cody Aiden, thanks to Cody and the tourism team, pre-COVID set the tools to really drive tourism there. And they're talking about like Springdale, it's overrun, and do we just give up the canyon to tourism and then just restrict any growth up and around the plateau on the east side? And now with Hilldale, kind of coming out of, this, it sounds, I don't mean to sound in a bad way, coming out of the ashes, but they still have dirt roads out there, right?
Yeah.
But like, this ability of this great mayor for the community of really brilliant, smart, hardworking, community-oriented people to like, how do you end up having like a little mini Springdale out there. It's freaking beautiful out there. It's amazing. So you have this huge expanse because it flattens out up there, and all of a sudden, you have a lot of ability to house and employ a lot of people, where there wasn't really any opportunity for that before, and now you have this new progress there.
Yeah,
too.
I think between Virgin and the wraparound that they're going to do the road over to Hilldale, Apple Valley, that whole junction is going to have lots of opportunity in the hospitality.
Well, it's going to have opportunity on, if you want something that's still a little small town, little acreage, right? They're not going to go highly density right out of the gate. Right, the density is going to continue to be centered here in Washington and St. George, really. And I know Washington City has its plan for its downtown and the Main Street exit and that. Yeah. But I think that's still cool. Is it's so close. We're still going to be able to have like a farm community and all the stuff that kind of takes us back to the heritage of Southern Utah and that small town feel. Like you still have so many great pockets of that possible within such a short distance.
Super short
distance. So it's the feeling that we're losing all that heritage.
No.
That's not. I don't look at it that way.
I think it's being expounded. I think it's being.
It's just the next chapter in what that heritage brings and the people that are here. But
exactly.
The more people that speak up, the better. Though I mean, the more engagement we get, the better.
For sure. And without or now your neck of the woods, last Black Desert is going to be another one that completely puts us on the map. The golf course has some massive announcements.
I know.
Coming up.
It's gonna be exciting.
It's gonna be awesome.
It's big. They got big stuff going on over there, which is great. And I can see how the city of Ivins, there's 200 people packing out our talkabouts about how do we handle the growth, which I love that community outreach. And there's some brilliant thoughts, right? Like on the opposing side, it's really smart thinking. My last thing is I hope that you continue to stay active and in the face of the negativity, right? Like I hope you could stay positive. You could keep your voice going, even though everybody's saying they want you to run for city council or whatever, right? Like just as long as you keep pushing that. We got a big, St. George City's got a city council election coming up.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be pretty active in that over the summer, trying to just get out the vote, get people to get out and make a good, solid vote, understand what the what the realities are of the moment in time, because I think it's a big moment in time. But man, I appreciate so much of what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you.
And
it's fun. I really enjoy it.
Thanks for sitting with me, man.
And thanks for all you do.
All right, buddy.
Thanks for having me, man.
We'll see you, dude.